Good afternoon, everyone. It's my immense pleasure to welcome you all to the second BBEST-Biofuture webinar. This webinar is in preparation for a series of events that we are organizing. It will start November 30 until December 2nd in a virtual mode, and next year we're going to have the hybrid conference in São Paulo with access to all registered participants to the BBEST-Biofuture conference. I'll ask to upload my slides. We are here welcoming you in the name of the FAPESP Bioenergy Research Program. BIOEN is launching its plans for the next decade. This will be discussed on December 1st with a session that will describe all the overarching themes that we are aiming to address. We would like to develop science and technology for the increase of biomass yields. We intend to diversify our feedstock options. We are working toward the development of platforms for efficient and competitive biomass conversion. We intend to improve energy efficiency and sustainability of bioenergy end use, and we are working towards accelerating the transition to bioeconomy. Next, FAPESP is the State of São Paulo funding agency. It funded in 2019 24,000 projects in all areas of knowledge. This amounted to 1.26 billion reais last year. FAPESP funded research in 54 higher education institutions, 40 governmental institutions, 24 non-governmental institutions, and 12,000 companies. In BIOEN was created in 2009. We have a very robust community working towards the improved production of bioenergy and bioproducts. We have around 400 researchers working on BIOEN, 200 startups being funded by the program, and over 1,300 publications. One of the activities, if you can go to the next slide, of the BIOEN is to enforce ties among scientific institutions, industry, and governments. And to this end, next, we are organizing the next slide. We are organizing the BBEST 2020 conference together with the Biofuture Summit. So I invite you to join our activities on November 30 to December 2nd, and also to schedule in your agenda participating in the activities of 24th to 26th of May 2021. So BBEST-Biofuture became two conferences. We hope you can join us there. Next slide. Going back to our main goals of the program, I'd like to highlight that these activities today are urgent and very welcome to science and technology and governments, players, stakeholders that are working this field, because we are planning how to expand bioenergy sustainably in a post-COVID economic recovery. So we have a very good team, a very knowledgeable and hands-on team to discuss economic recovery with bioenergy. And next week, we're going to be discussing improvement of end use. So my next slide, we would like to invite you to join us again next week for the third BIOEN webinar, which is going to discuss biofuels use in engines, stationary applications, hydrogen from biomass, and many other options that are on the table right now. With that, I would like to thank all the speakers, everyone that's helping us put this great BBEST-Biofuture conference together, and give the word to my esteemed colleague, Renato Godinho, who's leading the Biofuture platform and the discussion today with this wonderful group. Thank you, Renato, for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Glaucia, and thank you for introducing our conference series. We are already part of the Biofuture Summit, the second edition, and the BBEST conference, with the physical conference postponed to next year. So today we are in the second, as you said, the series of warm-up webinars. And I'm very glad and honored to moderate this webinar today, which is focusing on an important and urgent issue, which is the effects of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, on the bioenergy sector and the way forward. So to introduce this idea, we have done a first webinar in August, our first in the series, with discussing the effects of the principles in the Brazilian context alone. And now, for the second round, we are bringing a walkthrough around the world with you. We are very, very happy and fortunate to count with speakers representing governments from 3 continents and also the private sector. So we would like to know the Biofuture platform facing this challenge of the impacts of the COVID over bioenergy and the bioeconomy in general, responded with the preparation of a set of principles. So we are going to hear about them and the relation that the principles have to the policies that the governments are implementing, governments describing what they are doing already to scale up sustainable bioenergy in their fields. So I'll let you hear more about that from the speakers. Let me just say that as chair of the Biofuture platform, I have been helping to guide the negotiation and finally these principles, the finalization of them that have been supported by all the Biofuture platform countries. They have gone through a number of rounds of inputs from international agencies, the private sector, the countries themselves, and then undergone a number of rounds of consultation and negotiation among the countries. So their final form is here. They are non-binding principles, meaning that they are not formal treaties and they do not mandatory in the application, but their intention is to guide policy, to provide a direction or a sensibility that countries, for things that countries should avoid and should pursue while they try to deal with the effects, some of them quite negative, from COVID over the bioenergy sector, but also try to make the best about it, which I think is the most important part of the principles, building back better with bioenergy. So in order to start, let me pass the floor to Paulo Frankl. He's the head of renewable energy at the International Energy Agency. The International Energy Agency also works as the facilitator, the central agency supporting the Biofutures platform work. So Paulo has been in the center of the development of these principles, and he also leads, beyond the Biofuture platform, the IEA's work on renewables in general, providing policy advice to countries around the world on renewable energy. So Paulo is also a physicist and a PhD by training in energy and environmental technologies. And I hear that he is also an expert in life cycle assessment, which is quite applicable to the bioenergy field. So, Paulo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Renato. It's a pleasure and an honor to start this discussion on the biofuture principles for recovery. And I, in particular, would like to put them in a context and why these principles are important and why they call for an urgent action. If I could have my slides, please. Thank you. So in general, when we speak about renewables, most of the attention still remains on the electricity side, on solar and wind. But next, if yes, now in our previous scenario analysis, in our last scenarios, both the energy technology perspectives and the WIO, which just came out yesterday, two days ago, just decarbonizing the power sector only leads us to 1/3 of what needs to be done in order to go to net zero emissions, either in the mid of the century or a little bit later, but certainly by 2070. And this is because we need to decarbonize hard to abate sectors like transport, industry, and to some extent buildings, which already today make up half of all the CO2 emissions in the world. So what is the solution? Next, please. The solution is a large portfolio of clean energy technologies. I would like to be very clear on that. There is not a single magic solution to this the issue. It is not just renewables. It is even less just one particular technology, but click. Please, next. Yes, bioenergy has, however, a very important contribution to decarbonization, precisely because it provides answers to these hard-to-abate sectors. Plus, it can be combined with carbon capture, use, and storage in order to create negative emissions. And in the end, it would account, in a sustainable development scenario, for 1/5 of annual emission reduction. So 20%, which is a huge contribution to the total solution. This is why, in our view, looking at bioenergy is crucially important. Next, please. Now, to give just a few more numbers, the increase in the transport sector of the liquid biofuels is phenomenal, which would need quadrupling or even more of the shares of an increasing transport demand, with an important amount not just for road transport but also shipping and aviation. At the same time, we should never forget the share of biomethane and biogas in gas grid consumption for a number of other applications. And my third point here on the right of the slide is that, as I said before, we are looking at an all fuel, all technologies approaches. So we are looked also at hydrogen. And the reason why this is also important, and why I'm showing here hydrogen and biofuels together, is because in the longer term there will be a big basis of hydrogen-based, but also biofuels-based synthetic fuels, and overall we think that they could meet up to 20% of global energy demand. Global final energy demand in the STS, which is once again an enormous amount. Now, next please. The problem is, until 2019, biofuels production was increasing, but by far not at the velocity needed to achieve the long-term targets that I showed you. And then came the COVID-19 crisis. Click. Next, please. Next, if the animation is not stuck. Yes, thanks. And also the next one. So in 2020, and this is coming from a report that we published in May, we forecast actually a double-digit decrease, the first in 2 decades, of biofuel production. So not only The biofuels already before the crisis were not on track in terms of velocity of the growth needed, but unfortunately the COVID-19 has heavily hit the sector because of the combining issues of less demand of gasoline and diesel and therefore less mandates, and also for the very low oil prices, which is putting a burden in terms of competitiveness. So the sector has been hit very hardly. Next, please. However, there are also very important opportunities for recovery. And the IEA has published in June a sustainable recovery plan, which basically brings to three main objectives. One is boost global economy growth by 1.1 percentage point per year. It would save or create roughly 9 million jobs a year, and it would make 2019 the year remembered not just for the insurgence of the COVID, but also the year of the definitive peak in global emissions. Now, bioenergy has a fundamental role. One, because it is one of the most labor-intensive energy industries. Second, it employs globally around 3 million people. Sorry for the typo. And it has the second largest number of jobs per $1 million of spending, in particular in emerging economies where the crisis has hit very hard. And all this is why, next, please, you can click all the principles. The principles for recovery and acceleration are so fundamentally important, and let me list them, and then we will listen to examples from the other speakers. First, do not backtrack. This is not the moment for governments to step back in terms of long-term ambition and visibility. What the business really needs is to have certainty about the future and about ambitious targets on biofuels and bioenergy and the bioeconomy in general. Second, understand that there are businesses in big financial troubles now. For them, it is really important to surpass this crisis period of 1 to 3 years, and therefore consider shorter measures of relief for these businesses, with having in mind that, of course, they are transitional. Third, fossil fuel subsidies are still a major barrier to biofuels and sustainable biofuels in general. It is right now the moment, with low oil prices, to do reforms and to phase out fossil fuel subsidies, which has been discussed for many years. Fourth, in the recovery packages, build back better with bio. It is not just a question of energy, but also of other sectors, for instance, the transport sectors or the chemical sector, and I'm sure we will hear some examples from the other speakers. And fifth, never forget, bioenergy can and must be sustainable, and it is paramount important in the recovery principles and in any policies to reward sustainability with the right policy measures, like it happens in Brazil or in California or in other countries in the world. What we are striving for is the sustainability of bioenergy and the bioeconomy. Next, please. Just to conclude, I just want to add that the IEA is really proud and honored to be the facilitator of the BioFuture platform and now also the coordinator of the BioFuture initiative, SEM, under the Clean Energy Ministerial. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paulo. This has been a clear, powerful presentation, and I take three main messages. The first, that we have to accelerate bioenergy growth, and so we cannot afford it going down as it has been in this pandemic, and therefore the trend has to be reversed, and something has to be done. And the 5 principles are an important way to go about it. If those principles are indeed implemented, we have a good chance of not only reversing the trend, but pushing forward with more growth. And final message that you said, I think it is very important that bioenergy, being labor intensive, it can help economy as a whole to grow in a sustainable way and provide new green jobs. So that's very good, and I think this provides us a good bridge to call the speakers from key governments that are implementing, all members of the BioFuture platform, implementing policies that do represent one or more of those principles. So I'm happy to call on the stage Devin O'Grady. Devin manages a policy team in the Clean Fuels branch in the Ministry of Natural Resources, Canada, and therefore he is a key player in developing the Clean Fuels Standard, which is a very innovative policy that Canada has been together that touches to indeed embody the principle of rewarding sustainability. Devin is also responsible for advancing Canada's in international fora dedicated to bioenergy, including the BioFuture platform, where Devin is a part of the core group of countries. So I'm happy to have you here, Devin. Thank you.
Thank you, Renato, and thanks to the other speakers. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm pleased to be here today to speak with you about some of Canada's initiatives as we look into the context of bioenergy in our post-COVID economic recovery measures. So if you could bring up my slides, perfect. You can go to the next slide. Just an outline of what I'll speak to today, including kind of where we're going, and how we'll get there. And I'll get into some of the key policies, and then speak to some of the economic recovery potential measures before concluding. So next slide, please. So where we are today. As Renato just mentioned, Canada is proud to be a founding member of the BioFuture platform, which was launched in 2016. And we played a key leadership role at last year's Clean Energy Ministerial to mobilize the BioFuture platform into a SEM initiative. And of course, this was formally launched as the BioFuture initiative just this past month at SEM 11. Canada is home to building companies that are undertaking efforts in biofuels, broader energy initiatives, and carbon capture and storage as well. So some of the companies listed here, including Greenfield, Global, Suncor Energy, Carbon Engineering, and Enerchem, are undertaking innovative work in the bioenergy space. Canada is, of course, blessed with abundant natural resources and sustainable feedstocks. And we have robust, sustainable forest and agriculture supply chains and forest management practices that are in place to ensure the sustainability of these feedstocks. However, Canada has a lot of work to do. We have less than 5% of our energy is met with bioenergy and low carbon fuels. So we know we have a lot of work to do if we want to get to net zero. So next slide. So how do we get to net zero by 2050? The government of Canada considers bioenergy a key component of our plans to reach not only our 2030 climate targets, but also to achieve net zero in 2050. We see the potential for our economy to be powered by two equally important resources, which are clean power and low carbon fuels. And bioenergy presents opportunity to lower emissions in many of those hard to abate sectors that Paulo was mentioning, where electrification is more challenging. So these include fueling heavy freight, heavy industry such as mining, and marine and air transport. We see the potential for low carbon fuels and bioenergy powering up to 60% of our economy. So next we'll speak to how we can get there, or sorry, how the principles relate to how we can get there. So Canada was very supportive of the BioFuture platform principles, and we're already taking actions on many fronts. So this includes regulatory and policy actions. We're continually engaging with our industry stakeholders and assessing potential economic recovery measures across the full value chain of low carbon fuels, so including the production all the way to end use. So I'll speak to some of these initiatives in the next couple of slides. Next slide. So how we get there? We really see a suite of measures being required, and this includes policies, programs, and regulations. Canada is already committed to pricing carbon, phasing out coal, building modern green infrastructure, investing in cleaner energy resources, and supporting breakthrough technologies and innovations, which includes opportunities in bioenergy and low carbon fuels. Our forthcoming Clean Fuel Standard regulation will be the first of its kind in the world, and we see it as an important tool in advancing low carbon fuels and infrastructure across all sectors of Canada's economy. So next slide, I'll speak to the Clean Fuel Standard in some more detail. So the Clean Fuel Standard will require the reduction in carbon intensity of liquid, gaseous, and solid fuels used across the transportation, buildings, and industry sectors in Canada. Once implemented, it's expected to reduce 30 megatons of GHG emissions annually by 2030. The Clean Fuel Standard is being designed to send a strong signal for the production and use of low carbon fuels and technologies. And we see bioenergy playing a key role in both the successful implementation of the Clean Fuel Standard, and as I mentioned, in laying a foundation for Canada's net zero emissions by 2050 goal. So the Clean Fuel Standard will be, the first phase of the draft regulations will be released this fall, and the plan is to come into effect in 2022. I'll also mention that the Clean Fuel Standard includes criteria to ensure the sustainable use of agriculture and forestry feedstocks, as well as waste feedstocks. So next slide. So switching from policies and regulations to potential economic recovery measures, we need to use the pandemic as an accelerant to harness our combined will and expertise and resources to build back better and forge a new path to a cleaner, more resilient future. We see the potential to stimulate investments along the value chain that grow domestic production of low carbon fuels and ensure those hard to abate emissions intensive sectors are prepared to adapt their operations to use these fuels. If we were to take action now, it would not only support the economic recovery, but it would also complement key initiatives, which include early actions that are being outlined in the upcoming hydrogen strategy for Canada, and of course support the implementation of the Clean Fuel Standard. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we really see a full value chain approach being required. So a possible approach to this is for time-limited strategic investments that would be calibrated together, supporting actions across the full value chain. As I said, from production, distribution, end use, and key enabling measures that include research, development, and demonstration, awareness, and codes and standards. This would ensure the supply and demand grow at the same pace and provide more certainty and stimulate those private sector investments that are needed, as well as attract direct foreign investments and create high-paying jobs and economic impact in the Canadian economy. We go next slide. Canada has already announced previous economic measures throughout the pandemic, and some of those include environmental conditions that are needed in order to access the support. So for example, in May, Canada announced the Large Employer Emergency Financing Facility. This was a financial package for larger companies to sustain their operations and keep employees on their payrolls. It was available or is available to industries in Canada's resources sectors, provided they commit to future climate disclosures and environmental sustainability goals. Also key to our economic recovery planning is just transition and inclusiveness. Next slide, please. So as we plan out these potential economic recovery measures and policies and regulations, we're always considering leveraging our existing strengths that we have available to us. So as I mentioned, this of course makes use of our abundant sustainable feedstocks in order to produce a variety of low carbon fuels, including advanced ethanol, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, renewable natural gas, and hydrogen as well. We see there's a large ability to take our waste and turn it into feedstock for such fuels, as well as benefiting the circular economy. As I mentioned previously, we have world-leading companies that are already undertaking these actions and are innovating through new fuels and technologies. And we want to continue to support those innovations and drive them further. We have a large existing foundation already of petroleum refining infrastructure that can be repurposed to co-process biogenic material in order to produce low carbon fuels. We're also assessing opportunities for the government to lead by example through procuring low carbon fuels for use in our own government fleets, for example, in marine, air, and on-road transportation. And of course, all these measures and strengths link to our already other global initiatives, including mission innovation. Next slide. So here we see many opportunities across Canada, both in the what we would consider shovel-ready, so the next few years, and long-term as well, in terms of advanced biofuels and renewable gas opportunities. There is in the near term, we see potential for upwards of $6 billion in investment and several thousand jobs. And of course, it's not just in Canada that we see these opportunities. Many of our companies are forging strategic partnerships across the globe to enable projects in other jurisdictions. So I'll conclude by saying, next slide, that as we move forward together, this work is vital not only to our nations and our planet, but to our families and our future generations as well. We really see the principles for bioeconomy recovery supporting all these goals. And I'll leave it with that Canada is ready to roll up its sleeves, work hard, and play a leading role in moving forward. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Devin. This was very impressive as how comprehensive a country can be in their policies. So I see you hit in Canada, you're hitting many different keys at the same time. So it's extremely helpful as an example, first-in-class example of what to do and to think about the several stages of the bioeconomy and the way you are applying already the principles to your policy design. So I especially like how when you mentioned the value chain approach, because the sector being so complex, of course, in every stage of the process, there are different roadblocks. And if we don't remove them at the same time, we don't unlock increased production, we don't unlock consumption and investments. So maybe this look at the value chain, the stages in the production, which are very different among them, can be helpful in this way. And I think this quite leads us to the experience that will be brought to us by the next speaker from India. India is also a BioFuture platform member country, and is one with the greatest potential for growth, both for the huge market, the huge biomass potential. So India is really poised to be a leading player in the field for bioeconomy growth in the next decades. And they are trying already with important policy movements in recently, ever since the new biofuels policy in India, and coupled with a number of actions over exactly what we were saying, this food chain. So the supply chain in India for agricultural inputs, residues for advanced biofuels is incredibly complex, fragmented, and India is preparing to tackle this challenge. So we'd like to hear more about this from Dr. KK Jain. He is the head of the Center for High Technology in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, which is the ministry also responsible for biofuels policy in India, and is also a chemical engineer, so already has experiences in many companies before getting into the Ministry of Petroleum, including petrochemical projects in Indian oil and in refineries. So, and the Indian oil companies and refineries are key to this Indian policy. So I'm happy to hear more, and for our audience, Dr. KK Jain.
Thank you, Mr. Renato, Mr. Glaucia, and fellow speakers. Good day to all of you. I, on behalf of the Government of India, would like to present the efforts being made by India towards the bioeconomy. Can we switch over to the slides, please? Next, please. Yeah, so if we talk India, India is a growing country. It is the plane. The Indian energy demand is going to increase from 809 to 1968 million MTOE, so for around 4.5% CAGR. And this is because of there is a good growth in the transportation as well as the petrochemical area requirement. So unlike other developed countries, India is requiring a lot of energy, but there is a commitment that we want to grow through the clean energy. As we can see through our the pie chart, we want to increase the share of the gas from 6% to 7.3%, and we want to increase our biofuel or the renewable energy from meager 8%, 3.4% to we aspire to 18.2%. So this is also required because we are having huge import dependence. Crude import is around 85%. Our gas import is around 50%, and coal import is around 25%. So we want to reduce the coal import and we want to replace it by the renewable energy. Next, please. So India has made a very massive program to reduce the import. So by 2022, we are aiming to reduce the gas and oil import by 10%, and that is to be done through our in-house production of natural gas and crude. We want to increase our efficiency of our systems. We also want to increase the gas make through the gas production increase, as well as the major focus is to increase the compressed biogas production so we can replace the LPG requirement through that, and also the natural gas. We also want to do the demand substitution through PV, through the EV vehicle, and now the focus have also started on the green hydrogen. So this will be the major area where we want to play a major role. And the last but not but the last and most important is adopting the biofuel and renewable, and the total focus is on the domestic resources utilization. Next. So India has set the target of ethanol blending 10% by 2022 and 20% by 2030. Similar case is for the diesel, so it is 5% by 30. We must be surprised to know that the gasoline consumption in India at present is very million metric ton, and the diesel consumption is around 84 million. So replacing that by 20% and 5% means we require the huge biofuel to replace. Also, we are having the compressed biogas target of 15 million metric ton by 2023 by setting up around 5,000 CBG plants. There are a lot of challenges. India is a very vast country and geographically in different states. So all the biofuels available are very scattered. So it is not possible to bring them as an. So the target is to put up the bioprocessing plant at the scattered location so that the logistic cost is minimized. The major thrust has come the biofuel policy which was put up and approved by the government of India in June 2018. The main objective is to reinforce the ongoing ethanol and biodiesel supplies, decentralized biomassing, then setting up second generation biorefineries. We aim to put up initially the 12 second generation biorefineries, then the development of the alternate feedstock, the development of technology which are commercially viable, the development of the supply chain including the collection systems, biomass depots, creating the entrepreneurs for the aggregation systems, and they improve the viability through the viable gap funding. There is a very institutional mechanism. There is a national biofusion committee which is chaired by the Minister of Petroleum. It has got the representation from all the ministries so that the entire synergy can be obtained. There is a level on biofuel which is the joint secretary level. Find it has got the experts available from different areas. We are also having the state biofuel board so that there is a proper coordination now between the center and these state governments. Next, please. Here we can see our ambitious target. Our major thrust has started from 2018-19, and now we are at around 5.08% gasoline ethanol blending is there, and we are having very ambitious target 2022 to replace the gasoline of around 4.5 million metric ton by ethanol, and by 2030 we require around 13.2 million metric ton of so the thrust is both 1G ethanol as well as the 2G ethanol. So a lot of financial supports and the interest subvention is being given for the 1G plants as well as for 2G ethanol. There is separate scheme that has been published which is called as the Prime Minister Jivan Yojana, through which 12 commercial plants are coming and 10 demonstration plants with different technologies are being encouraged. And there is a huge viability gap fund which is available, and it is around $280 million. BGF fund is available, which is being utilized for this 12 commercial plant. Next, please. So we are also trying to house technology for second generation ethanol. So the Praj is one, and the other technologies are also placed in the country like the Campolis, Finland, and the Lanjatech. All are working towards putting up these 12 biorefineries. Next, please. Now there is a lot of thrust which is now coming on the biodiesel. Of course, the major initiatives have been taken on the ethanol side. The biodiesel is coming now, and the government is planning to replace by around 9 million metric ton by 2030. And now the government has allowed to use of the waste cooking oil as source for the production. The potential of UCO in India is very high. The vegetable oil consumption is around 23 million tons, which is as per the Indian habits are typically different. So we consume lot of vegetable oils which generates around 3 million ton of this waste UCO, which will be utilized for conversion into the biodiesel. Now this is the very successful scheme. We call it as the Satat Sustainable Alternate towards Affordable Transport. And through this, we are putting up now 5,000 plants by 2023, which will generate around 15 million metric ton of compressed biogas and around 50 million metric ton of the manure. The plant cost is around $4.7 billion approximately per plant, and the total investment is around $23 billion. The sale of CBG has been started. This is totally based on the in-house technology, very successful and commercially viable models. So it is being implemented very big way. Next, please. Now, bio-ETF side also, although we have started late, but still the successful flight has been operated with around 25% biojet fuel, which the flight was successfully tested from Dehradun to Delhi in the month of August in 2018, and now a lot of efforts are there to cost of the bio-ETF so that it can be commercially we put it. This is very important in the Corsia also, and it is in our priorities. Next, please. Now, another thrust started through conversion of MSW, municipal solid waste, to the energy, because now the government is planning to develop around 105 smart cities, and where a lot of incentives are being given so that the MSW can get into the energy, first in the form of power, then we want to convert into even hydrogen in the later stage. Next, please. Now, so if you want to conclude, so the government of India, there is a, so biofuel is the major thrust area. There is a all-out effort to augment the feedstock availability through the crop yield, improvement of the crop, and the development of the alternate crops also. We have given the slogan Atmanirbhar Bharat, and through this we want to develop our rural assistance in development of the biofuel supply chain. Lot of subsidies are being given for this, and there is assistance in technology development. There is viability gap fund available, and available for the second generation ethanol itself. Various types of also under place. Related environmental clearance. This has been biofuel has been covered under the priority sector. So the environmental clearance is now very quick. There's a long-term offtake guarantee that has been given by the oil marketing companies. So there is no issue of the supply chain on the downward side. The priority sector lending and the interest subvention is there, which I have already discussed. There is attractive pricing mechanism, which is continuously being reviewed based on the crude pricing and the gasoline pricing in the country. Lot of fiscal incentives and viability gap fundings are available. So with this, I want to conclude, and thanks. And a lot of efforts are there. I am open to the questions if at all any there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. Hello, you hear me?
Perhaps Renato is having a bad connection. So if
I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, Renato, take over.
This has been a great presentation. So these are indeed impressive numbers from India, and we could see in how many fronts India is working for supply, for different technologies, biogas, HVO, ethanol, first and second generations. And it is very impressive to see how all of this, practically all of this, has been put in place by the government of India only in the last few years. So it is very encouraging to see and expect that the results shall come soon with an impressive increase in the bioeconomy, the sustainable bioeconomy for India. And you mentioned questions, Dr. Jain. I wish to also encourage the audience, those who are registered for the BioFuture Summit conference have the option to log in only for the registered participants, officially registered for the whole conference. They can log in the questions system, so that please go ahead and I encourage you to put questions forward. And now I shall introduce a speaker which is not hailing from a government, but from the private sector. And the bioeconomy cannot be realized, of course, without the private sector, and government are there to build the policy environment. But the doers, of course, the business and private sector. And I'm happy to welcome here a representative from Neste, Neste is a Finland-based multinational company, which is one of the leaders for the low-carbon bioeconomy, producing renewable diesel, aviation biofuel from residues, and also moving to providing technology for biochemicals as well and biorefining. So this is a model of the bioeconomy that is envisaged in the BioFuture platform, and Mr. Ilkka Räsänen, we have the honor to have here the Vice President for Public Affairs of Neste. Ilkka, please, we're here to see your perspectives on the principles, how you see them useful for the sector expanding, and how you see the effects of the pandemic and your outlook for the sector going forward.
Right. Thank you very much, Renato, for the kind introduction, and it's truly a pleasure to be part of this panel today. Can I have my first slide, please? I want to begin with underline how timely and important this panel is. The timing is very critical. The topic is crucial as not backtrack from our ambition to decarbonize our economies despite the COVID-19 pandemic. In my brief remarks, I will lay out from the Neste perspective the challenge that we see and the solutions that we think are and will be available. Policy frameworks are right, and then address two of those biofuels, rather biofuture principles, namely the one on not backtracking and the other one on rewarding sustainability. Can I have the first next slide, please? So this slide here depicts the challenge. The dark blue area, the area of the slide, represents the global oil consumption in 2019. It was around 4.5 billion tons as per the IEA statistics, and it was predicted to grow to some 4.9 billion tons by 2040. Now, obviously, this forecast was made before the COVID-19 pandemic, so hence a little disclaimer: nobody really knows where the consumption will go, but I think if we do find a vaccine and the world economy begins to recover, I think we'll pick up on the old trends unless we do something different. And therefore, for the sake of discussion, we're assuming, the direction and order of magnitude of the challenge of replacing crude oil will be of this magnitude, and it is immense. The lighter blue box represents the share of oil demand for transport in 2019. Next slide, please. So how to then look at the road transportation trend, just to give also a closer look to that particular segment, predicted before pre-COVID area or time that the road transportation fuel globally would grow some 10% during this decade. And although we see now relatively fast penetration of electric cars in many markets, the predictions were that we will have some 140 million electric vehicles, passenger cars, mainly on the roads by 2030. But that would only represent some 10% of all passenger car sales globally. And if these predictions prove to hold, we would have some million ton additional CO2 emissions yearly by 2030. Next slide, please. And that was only on road transport. Aviation emission trends are worrying. We'll cover them here, but certainly an area that we would need to. So in this slide, we've then depicted how the electric cars that are forecasted to be on the roads in 2040 will replace oil consumption. So dotted line, white square is the forecast 130 million electric vehicles in 2040, and the area of that white dotted square represents the amount of oil that those electric cars would replace 20 years in the future. On the left-hand side, the green solid box is the current biofuels production globally, and the dotted green box is the predicted biofuels production in 2040 based on today's technologies and feedstocks. So we can indeed see what Paulo Frankl said in the beginning: there is no one single solution. Here you have two of the known solutions. There are more, but none of these that are in the mainstream today, I would say, are nearly enough to replace the oil even in the transport sector. Next slide, please. And the good news here is that there's more to come. This is what we believe at Neste. This slide was together by a group of our researchers who put on the table their collective wisdom on the lower end estimates and higher end estimates for 2040 for different new feedstocks and technologies that convert them to fuels, and also included the power to liquids technology into this forecast. And as you can see, we believe that almost half of the fossil fuel consumption in transport could be replaced by biofuel and synthetic fuels in 2040. But obviously, for that to happen, we will need to have the right policy frameworks in place to create the incentives for companies to invest and for consumers to exercise their choice in choosing cleaner fuels. And that takes me to the policy principles. Next slide, please. So, do not backtrack. I need say no more on the principle. It's perfectly worded. Here, what you see in the world map are some of the maybe most well-known, or at least most biofuels regulatory frameworks that exist. By no exhaustive, and I personally learned a lot from the presentation by Jain about what India is doing. But here to RFS, LCFS, future CFS, Renewable, BIOEN, the Southeast Asian biodiesel mandates are paving the way. The point here is, let's keep them. Let's make them more ambitious. On the ambition, let's raise the stakes, but let's not change the fundamentals of the regulatory frameworks because of the COVID-19 or because of other solutions that we see coming, because we need all of them. Therefore, stay the course on these policies, raise the ambition, and investments will follow as they have always followed policy lead in this sector. Next slide, please. Reward sustainability, a principle that is a must-have, as was stated by several of the panelists before me. Here I picked up just a couple of examples in this table box here on the right-hand side of the slide of the markets that we as Neste know well. Germany and Sweden have implemented a greenhouse gas reduction obligation, which means that more performing the biofuels or other solutions are in terms of their greenhouse balance calculated over the life cycle, the better value will fetch from the market. In Finland, the country I know the best, the tax regime on the excise tax rewards biofuels made from waste and residues and lignocellulosics by giving zero tax rate on the carbon dioxide tax component of the excise tax. So there is a carbon tax built into the excise tax system, and it gives a specific reward also to waste residues and lignocellulosic-based biofuels. In California, a market and a state that many of you know as a LCFS is a world-renowned program. Sustainability is rewarded by producer-specific biofuel pathways, which take into account feedstock sourcing, transport, refining, and all the parts in the conversion chain in order to give a company-specific, pathway-specific carbon intensity score that will then reward all the efforts of the producers to produce as carbon light way as possible. And that will have a direct impact market, which provides a great incentive for the market players. I will end my presentation here and look forward to further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Räsänen. This was very illuminating, as your presentation were a great complement to Paulo's presentation, saying how each of the pathways, each of the technologies are needed, each one to make a small dent in the demand for oil in the transportation sector. So this is the sector that is most difficult to decarbonize. And I appreciate your views as well on the policy aspect. I take this opportunity to build up some movements for and invite all of you to be back here in November for the BioFuture Summit 2, the mini policy forum. Because when you say that this reward sustainability is necessary, and you mentioned a lot of mechanisms, different mechanisms that are being used in different countries to do so. So how those mechanisms differ? What would be the most efficient ways to promote sustainability? The most efficient, the most fair, the most secure. So there are different experiences, and we are not drilling into these policy details here, but that is the point that we aim to address in this policy forum in November, discussing these details of the policies and looking at some preliminary results of the one for the instruments of the BioFuture platform, which is the policy blueprint, dealing exactly with these kind of issues. And for now, also speaking about policies and innovation, I want to invite here to the stage, last but not least, a representative from the government of France, Francis and Robert Mauri. He's the Deputy Director for Sustainable Air Transport in the Ministry of Fair and Ecological Transition of the government of France. And Robert is spearheading in his department the setup of a very important economic recovery package that France has been putting together for the air sector. So we're here specifically to hear Robert on the perspectives for the energy transition in the air sector, the air transport. So it's part of the transport sector and very challenging to decarbonize, and the perspectives for the introduction of the bioeconomy in there as well, which from the international agencies and all the calculations, they are currently the most promising solution with the most potential to decarbonize the aviation sector. So Robert, please, I welcome you to the floor here.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I thank BioFuture and Renato for its introduction and all the team, but also all participants for giving me the opportunity to say a few words from the French civil aviation authorities. The current health crisis, as we know, has an important impact on the air transport. That's called for an accelerated ecological transition of this mode of transport to make it stronger, more resistant, and above all, more sustainable. To prepare for the future already means helping air transport actors to get through this unprecedented crisis. Thus, the French state has decided a global response whose primary objective is to enable air transport players to cope with it. A plan to support a green and competitive industry involving 15 billion euros has been coordinated with the industry. The health crisis must not jeopardize the know-how of this industry of excellence and nor hinder its ability to bounce back and still innovate. This plan is based in particular on the 1 billion euros of public aid to the industry over the 3 next years to support research and innovation over the long term. Its objective is to remain one of the most advanced countries in terms of green aeronautical technologies by preparing for the next technological breakthrough, drastic reduction in fuel consumption, electrification of aircraft, and switch to more sustainable fuels. But it's also necessary to support companies. Airlines are facing financial difficulties and a loss of turnover that could exceed 280 billion euros in 2020, putting their survival at stake. This crisis also poses a risk to orders for new aircraft, spare parts and maintenance. Air France will benefit from 7 billion euros in state aid in the form of direct loans or guaranteed bank loans. The support is also conditional of the group's preparation of a profound transformation, rebound and ecological transition, plan to ensure its full competitiveness in the new post-crisis environment. Thus, it's not only a question of getting through the crisis and returning to the previous situation, but also of seizing this opportunity to lay the foundation for a new aviation, accelerating its environmental transition, because the ecological transition and the health crisis invite us to a kind of refund ourselves, to refund ourselves. Technical advances in the recent decades have already made it possible to significantly reduce the environmental impact of aircraft. In line with the European ambition embodied by the Green Deal, the French government therefore intends to prepare for the environmental breakthrough of aviation by reinforcing and transforming the capacities of all the components of the industry. It is a question of mastering in less than a decade the integration in aircraft of this breakthrough technology that will underpin the ecological transformation of the sector. By 2020, preparatory work on green aircraft will be launched in several fields: ultra-sober thermal engine, hybrid electric propulsion, aircraft with hydrogen as the main energy source, etc. This action on energy and propulsion modes will be particularly important for the sector. The accelerated development of green aircraft and the development of sustainable aviation fuels are solutions that need to be implemented quickly. In the long term, France hopes that the development of synthetic hydrogen will make it possible to power zero CO2 emission aircraft. The government and the French aeronautic industry are therefore launching several exploratory projects this year concerning the use of hydrogen as the main energy source for aircraft. We know that hydrogen is the cleanest burning fuel. If the technical research we are launching is successful, then the challenge will be to have sufficient quantity of clean hydrogen available. But in the short and medium term, the use of sustainability aeronautical biofuels is the most technically mature lever to initiate this decarbonation. The challenge is to increase production capacity by creating a sustainable fuel production sector for aeronautics. Allow me to insist just a little on this short-term action concerning the development of sustainable fuels. In December 2017, the main manufacturers signed a green growth commitment with the state concerning the establishment of sustainable biofuel industry in France. Their discussions, which ended in June 2019, made a major contribution to the establishment of a government roadmap for the deployment of aeronautical biofuel sustainable, published at the beginning of this year. It defines the deployment trajectory based on the biofuel incorporation rate of 2% in 2025 and 5% in 2030, with a long-term objective of 50% biofuels by 2050. This roadmap is based on 5 fundamental principles. First principle, maintain an optimal level of flight safety through technical certification of biofuels. Second one, to ensure the sustainability of aeronautical fuels produced in France, notably thanks to so-called second generation biofuels made from non-food resources, mainly from waste. The third principle insists on the viability of the sector, whose economic model must allow the emergence of a competitive and sustainable market without excessive extra costs for the fuel produced. The fourth principle is the establishment of simple logistic chains that are economical in terms of CO2 emissions. The fifth principle is the consistency of French initiatives with European and international strategies to combat climate change in the field of air transport. As part of this roadmap, the French government has just launched a call expression of interest to determine the best tools to promote the development of the sector and to identify innovation players and their investment projects in advanced biofuel production units. This procedure is on the way and should help us to achieve this objective. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize on the principle number 5. It is essential to support a movement for the widest possible network of platforms and countries offering sustainable fuels. This is the movement that France is pursuing with its European partners, and that it is happy to lead at the international level in connection with the platform as BioFuture. As mentioned by some other speakers, this is not time to backtrack. That's for sure. It's time for sustainable fuels, because consider that the development of biofuels is indeed an essential part of the immediate future of aviation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Robert, and for this strong concluding words, and also for this impressive look at the aviation roadmap for aviation biofuels in France. It is certainly a challenge that is starting to be tackled all around the world, how to create the supply for aviation biofuels. And we can now move into the question and answer session of this webinar. Thank you for everyone that are staying with us. We still have an audience above simultaneous viewers above 250. And I'd like to start, Robert, you were the last to speak, and I'd like to start with you first for a question then. I think it is only fair. And to have a little detail, when you discuss the roadmap in France, the targets, they're quite impressive for aviation. But still, there is not a very strong policy mechanism as we see in road transport in many countries, including France. For instance, a blending mandate that would be applied for aviation biofuels. So, and these instruments, I know they are being discussed in the European level as part of the EU Green New Deal, also internally in France as part of the aviation recovery package. I know that everything is still under debate and there is no decision from the government, but I'd like your views on how is the discussion going for this kind of instrument or others, more strict instrument for creating the demand for a new industry that doesn't have scale yet. It's a classic instrument to create scale. And how you see the debate going on in France?
Well, I think the debate is increasing, it's advancing. At this respect, as you mentioned, a lot of things are ongoing now at French level, but of course at the European level too. France is in favor. Our minister expressed in the disposition to a future mandate. And as I have mentioned, we have taken some engagements respecting some commitments for our own objective of production and integration of biofuels. You will forgive me. I can't hardly tell you more about the next steps at France as at European level. Because that is in ongoing, and as for our call, the procedure results should be known soon. But we consider that the possible mandate is an important part of the new commitments from Europe in the mark of the Green Deal. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. So let's move on with the questions. We have already a number of questions from the audience here. But I wish to go back to our first speaker now, and a question to Paulo would be, Paulo, you are under your responsibility the whole of renewable energy function at the IEA. So you work with IEA members and associates around the world on the recovery programs, the COVID situation. So with this perspective that you have for renewable energy in general, how do you see the state of bioenergy, the kind of attention that it is having in country strategies as compared to other renewables and in the COVID situation? How that has been evolving?
First I would like to say that in general terms, the renewables have proven to be more resilient than any other fuels. If you look at the overall numbers also that were published the other day with the World Energy Outlook, energy demand as a whole will drop by -5% in 2020, with record demand decreases of both coal and oil. This is an unprecedented shock in the world economy, while renewables in general will slightly increase. Sorry for the background of my children crying. Now, for renewables, however, there is a big difference between the biofuels transport and the power sector. The biggest source of resilience is electricity, and in particular wind and solar, that in 2020 have been continuously increasing, actually at record level with respect to the past. While, as I said before, biofuels unfortunately had a drop. and it's a double-digit drop. We are revising up the numbers, but it's not really the decrease is important, and therefore I insist there is a crucial need for governments to put bioenergy more under the policy focus of the recovery packages, having in mind the positive externalities that they bring. And in these positive externalities, I would mention two important things. One is jobs, because as I said, the bioenergy sector is more labor intensive than others. And second is the immediate environmental gain that can be done with fuels that can be immediately being used in a number of contexts, while other situations or solutions like electric vehicles, which are very important and which, as you know, the IEA is very much in favor for, require more time and require more infrastructure. So the biofuels can bring some environmental and social benefits very quickly, and this is exactly what we need in the coming 1 to 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo, for that. So I always tend to say, I like to say that in the case of wind and solar, all the evidence point that the policy incentives are quite aligned and are quite appropriate for growth and resilience. So most of what you said in the difference may be tied to how the market is structured instead of the technology itself. So in wind and solar for electricity in general, as you said, you have a long-term contract, you have energy auctions in case of Brazil, whereas you have a very secure contract in the few years ahead in the decade, sometimes a decade long, to provide the energy contracted. So it is very bankable. It's very safe for investors to invest commercially, as opposed to the bioenergy field where there are uncertainties all along related to the price of inputs, the price of oil, and many others. So I think this is a key point that our countries need to address. And I have a question here for Devin from Canada. Devin, you have outlined a number of actions and strategies on a lot of fronts for Canada. So in relation to the bioeconomy, so how do you see, this is a question from Uwe Fritsche, is watching us. How do you see the development of bioenergy within the Canadian bioeconomy? So you see trade-offs, synergies, and which would be those?
Thanks for the question. I think there'll be, as we kind of pursue a number of initiatives across different parts of the economy, and as I referenced, different suites of fuels, and not just in transportation, but in industry and buildings as well. We're looking at a coordinated approach as best as we can, working with other members within the Canadian federal government. So we work closely with our colleagues in the Canadian Forest Service, as well as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So we try and we have bioeconomy working groups at the federal government level to ensure that we're all kept up to speed in terms of what potential measures may be put forward, and that can include kind of reinvigorating existing programs that have done well in terms of pushing new innovative uses of feedstocks or fuels, as well as creating new ones to support new policies like the Clean Fuel Standard. So it is definitely a balance, and there will be trade-offs. There's no question. As we kind of look to complement policies with our programming, and I guess break down those barriers to further deploy the most beneficial fuels for the best purpose in terms of end use.
Thank you, Devin. I have already another question here for Dr. Jain. Dr. Jain, you have told us of how India is tackling a lot of the challenges, structural challenges for growing, scaling up the bioenergy and bioeconomy production. But how do you see and how the government is seeing the impact of COVID in those plans? Are there specific measures being discussed to tackle the effects of the pandemic, maybe on the demand or on future growth, or you don't see a lot of impact in those policies? How are you reacting to the situation?
Yeah, I would like to share some of the experience during the COVID time, what we witnessed. You know very well that India is a very vast and very populous country, is having 1.3 billion population. Out of that, 50% resides in the rural area. Whereas if we see in the economic contribution, the rural economic contribution is 15% compared to the population of 50%. That's why the most of the people comes out from the villages or rural area and comes to the industrial area, which are mostly in the say Mumbai side, Maharashtra, or say northern side, Delhi and Punjab side, where these rurals come and are on their daily basis. During this COVID time, when the peak time was there was a lockdown announced, and India witnessed was a massive migration of these labor forces which were working in this industrialized states. But because of the lockdown, all the factories were shut down. There was no demand, there was no job, so they had to go back to their respective area to earn whatever they can earn in their own places. That was the thing which was realized by the government, that this mass migration can be avoided if the rural economy. So for India, it's a great challenge, not for but also for development of the rural economy itself, which can be boosted through the biofuel economy. So the efforts are there, and now the focus has shifted more and more that to develop these small areas where these rural people can work and can contribute to the GDP of the country. If we talk about the impact that time, you know very well the major thrust in India which has come from the 2018 onwards. So all the projects are in very advanced stage of completion or just are in the stage of commissioning. So Indian government provided a lot of supports towards if whatever the loan or etc. they had taken, those small scale industries which were building these plants. Moratorium of say loan means the deferment was allowed, even the interest that was subvented. So this kind of support has been given, and all this what we can say means the act of God kind of thing. This was defined under that clause. So that in case of if suppose there is no payment that is done, we will say by the entrepreneurs, even that has been allowed, the government has taken the guarantee on behalf of. In fact, the soft loan has also been extended to these small entrepreneurs which are working not only for the biofuel kind of, also other small scale projects which are in the rural area. So there is a lot of thrust, there is a lot of support that handed by the government in this area. And regarding the question of backtrack, the question we have just started. We are having a massive goals, massive aspirations are there. So we have just the beginning. So there is no question of backtracking in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. That is very good to hear. And there is this interesting, very crucial link that you raised between migration from rural areas and the bioeconomy, and how it could be linked to that and help to stave off migration that could be harmful to rural areas. And there are some also who believe this is the case in different regions and countries. There is a question here from the audience that is not to any speaker in particular, so I'll pose it here and see who will be brave enough to try and answer it. And the question is about Africa. So there are huge opportunities in Africa for the bioeconomy. This is a question for Marvin Tabi. But industry support is needed to realize African production, and there is a reluctance to finance investments there. So how can knowledge and governance gaps be closed to catalyze an Africa production ecosystem in the way that India is doing right now?
Yeah, this question is to whom?
Well, I think you can volunteer first, and then maybe we can have other speakers as well. But it was not to anyone specifically, but you...
No, let somebody, some other person can answer this question better way. I can talk to my question that has been posed to me is regarding the decentralized sources of biomass residue and the gaps of knowledge and the science that could address. No, the question is
Okay, go
not a
ahead, and
gap.
then we go back to Africa later. But go ahead on that question from Professor
Yes. So
Glaucia.
what I'm saying, so the India focus is to put up the biorefineries or to put up the compressed biogas plant decentralized way, so that the logistic cost is minimized. One thing is the cost minimization. Second thing is to develop the local entrepreneur and the local bioeconomy. So effort is that only to decentralize all the bioprocess, be it second generation refinery, be it the compressed biogas plant, or be it the biodiesel plant. So we want to put up a smaller but at the different locations and in scale. On the CBG side is technology is well developed and it's mostly economical to put up those plants. On the second generation biorefineries, the efforts are on. Yes, there is a technology gap, and a lot of R&Ds are going on to address and to reduce the OPEX of the 2G plant. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. So this links again to the question about the potential and what has to be done in Africa so it can reproduce some of the success that this is having in India. Paulo, we want to tackle this?
So I would say, well, let me make the analogy with the solar, which is an easier task for the investment, and still even solar in Africa has only 2% of the world installed capacity. Excuse me. So what is missing is the attention for bioenergy, of development banks, of concessional debt, which would make investment too risky. The problem is the risk of investment.
I see. Professor Glaucia, you hear us. You also worked a lot with Africa and the possibilities of bioenergy there. Do you wish to comment on this?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we had global assessment of bioenergy sustainability built in cooperation with SCOPE, which is the Scientific Committee of Problems of the Environment. A policy brief was issued that derived from this work that included 131 researchers from 34 countries. And this latest policy brief was focused on Africa, the opportunities to expand in Africa and Latin America the production of bioenergy. And the main conclusions are that we have enough lands, that it does not compete with food security, that bioenergy could complement within the economies with decreasing equality problems, so it could bring wealth to rural regions. There are some opportunities to engage the control of ecosystems problems, education problems. We saw there is increased education in areas where agriculture partners with bioenergy production. So the repurposing of labor in more modern agriculture efforts could benefit. We could also benefit when bioenergy is produced, because we do need to associate it with decreasing emissions. We could contribute to reinforcing of agroecological zonings, so we could keep the forests growing and do not decrease opportunities for better education or decreasing inequality within regions, and also bringing profit. So this is the big Achilles heel of bioenergy. It has to be more profitable, and we are finding ways to bring in new products to agriculture and benefiting the whole society in many regions that don't have access to better energy options. So we do need to substitute fossil fuels immediately in Latin America, Caribbean, and Africa regions that could put immediately into use biofuels and bioenergy options. We stress that the BioFuture initiative can produce a larger community of knowledge throughout many regions in the globe. We are seeing many examples discussed here already that I think could apply to Africa and also to Latin America.
Thank you, Glaucia. This is a very good discussion, and we are now approaching our allotted time. I have another question. So you have been saved for last, Ilkka from Neste. So I'll pose two questions to you. So Professor Glaucia spoke of new products and technologies, and you have been in the forefront of this. In your presentation, you made a great bridge and perspective on the BioFuture principles and how they could be applied, and you work on different countries around the world. So one question is specifically on Brazil. I think it's from one of our Brazilian watchers here, Alison. How aware you are of the HVO biofuels market developments in Brazil, and what would be your plans for the country here in terms of investments going forward? But in general, I also have a question to you as well. Based on your experience in those countries and assessing what markets should you enter, where should you use your installed bases, where should you get the biomass? What do you see as the main roadblock, or maybe the main roadblocks for further scale up of advanced biofuels?
Okay, thank you, Renato. To start with the question about Brazil in particular, yes, we are aware of the studies the government consider including HVO into the local which we would recommend. Obviously, as the world's largest HVO producer, you will get a high quality drop in fuel with no blending limitations in practice. It's good to keep in mind to have a broad enough feedstock base for it, such that there wouldn't be any constraints in volumes. That would be our recommendation. On the investments and roadblocks, any big, large-scale investment is a complex calculation of several factors. Obviously, our business, Neste, is quite large scale, and we get scale benefits from large-scale production. So we've concentrated so far our investments into Finland, Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and Singapore, where there are logistics hubs, all the utilities available, logistics easy to scale up. But going forward, as we as a company have a big growth ambition, we're certainly looking into many other markets. Regulatory framework, its predictability and stability is a key factor, probably the most important one, so that we have a long-term view on how the policy will develop and will not change. That's important. Then, of course, also a certain neutrality towards feedstock. One should look at the LCA analysis of different feedstock and not just pick and choose favorites. That's something that we've observed around the world that leads to good results if you're just look at the CO2 balance, and that's the only criteria that you use. Not the only one, obviously, there are other sustainability elements, but CO2 on life cycle basis should be the basis for the feedstock base. Biggest roadblocks, I think regulatory uncertainty always scares away investment. And COVID-19 situation, of course, maybe made both businesses and governments consider are they moving too fast, or can our economies afford using expensive fuels? And I think for that to overcome this conversation like this and the that have been published by the platform, which are also upheld by IEA, etc., are very important. So we keep the faith. We exchange on the policy and technologies, and have the courage to make decisions that will pave the way forward. Those would be my recommendations.
Thank you, Ilkka. And I think this message serves as well as a summary of the event here. There would be much more for us to keep discussing here, but unfortunately we are out of time. Let's finish with this message that many of you have repeated in your interventions, maybe all of you. There is to be no backtracking. And we need our foot on the gas pedal, and rather saying the biogas pedal, to move forward and accelerate the bioeconomy. And probably, as you have been saying, Ilkka, the way to do that probably goes through a stable, long-term, and enabling policy framework. So maybe this must be the most important component of all. That has to be in place for this to happen. And aside from this, tackling specific roadblocks throughout the supply chain, and handling different issues, but with the bioeconomy being part of the solution as well, not only for decarbonization, but also for providing green jobs in rural areas, including for avoiding migration, unwanted migration, as we have heard today. So I think this was a great event, very, very specific, very rich. Thank you all. I wish to, before passing the floor to our co-chair of the BioFuture and BBEST conference, Professor Glaucia, I wish just to finalize inviting you again to attend the November 30 mini policy forum where we can dig deep into the specific mechanisms of the policies that are being tried around the world to try and achieve this enabling stable policy framework that we have talking about here. Thank you again. Thank you to the audience, Professor Glaucia. You have the final words.
Well, I would like to thank you all for attending, for the guidance of Renato Godinho throughout this webinar. I would like to congratulate all BioFuture platform members since our FAPESP Bioenergy research program launched in 2009. I am very happy to say that this is, I think, a clear progress towards sustainable expansion of bioenergy in the world. We have highlighted in the last years the importance to bring together science and policy to define what are the most important points to address that can unlock the potential of bioenergy towards benefits in many areas of knowledge. And I think we are getting very close with the help of the platform, with the help of many partners within this platform and in our collaboration with science institutions. Our network is growing stronger, and I think we can do it. I think if we have a very clear, transparent policy framework that uses our guiding principles presented throughout this day, it will be very important towards decreasing emissions and preserving our ecosystem services. So I encourage everyone to join our future discussions on these principles and on science that is needed to fulfill them. Thank you all.